Thanks so much for having me. I'm really happy to be here this morning. It's morning where I am anyway. So thank you for having me here to talk about community. It is one of the things that I am most excited to talk about because I find myself in it all the time in different ways and different places. And so today we're going to talk about whether or not you do need a community. And spoiler alert, the answer is yes, but I think it's about like finding the right community for you. So we're going to talk about that. Before we get into it, I'll just tell you a little bit more about myself. So as Darren said, I am a technical community builder at Deepgram, and I also am the creator and one of the maintainers at Virtual Coffee. Prior to my tech career, I spent 10 years teaching college English. Before that, I was a community organizer for a year. And I moved over to tech a couple of years ago. I went to a boot camp, so I have a non-traditional background. And then at the initial shutdown with COVID, I lost my job. That was my first developer job. I had been in it about 8 months. And it was really tough because I have 4 kids and school was shut down. So I was interviewing really for the first time ever because my contract work was just a great conversation that I had with someone and it felt like a good fit. But now I was interviewing with my kids home, having to do work, teach them from home, and also try and live in this pandemic world. And so I found that my past, I'd come into tech after I'd gone through a major medical trauma. And I was having the same feelings that I did in those moments where I felt really lost, felt like kind of hopeless. I didn't know what was going on. And then that's when I said, hey, does anybody want to meet up for virtual coffee on Twitter? And when I did that, people did. And then I found that all of those things that I experienced from that trauma, the healing that I had been working through, it was found in the answer that we shouldn't be isolated. We should be together. And it was really hard to be together in a pandemic, but we found those paths online. And so from there, over the last 2+ years, I've spent a lot of time doing community organizing online because that's how we help each other grow. That's how we grow ourselves. And that's how we find healing in a lot of the things that we're going through. So that's kind of my very short version of what brought me to this point and why I'm here today talking to you about community. But it is all to say that I think that community is an important part of our growth and where we go in our lives and careers. So now that we've kind of got those intros and you know where I'm from, I want to make sure that we're on the same page when we're talking about community because there's so many different definitions out there. I think that at its core, community is a group of people that have a connected sense of belonging. There might be an interest, a product, or a practice that ties them together. And I know this is pretty general, but we'll get more specific and talk about that. There's another definition that I really like for community, and this is from Chris Brogan. He says, the difference between an audience and a community is which direction the chairs are pointing. In this sense, community is about developing relationships, engaging with people, being a part of something together. You're not talking at them, you're talking with them. And I really love that sense of connectedness and engagement and being a part of something together when we talk about community. Now, I also think that it's helpful to know what is not a community. This helps us to get further understanding here. It's not an audience. It's not people who just come to get their questions answered. It is a group that has some central focus, something that brings them back to work together. And it's a group that interacts in some way. Now, I mentioned this before, but there are some different types of communities, and I think it's worth noting that this isn't an exhaustive list and that there's often overlap in these things. But as you're searching for a community, it's useful to know what kind of communities there are out there. So the first one, product community, that is obviously focused on a particular product. So that might be like Nike or Salesforce or Atlassian, or some other product that people are interested in using or use frequently. Another type of community is a community of interest. This is where you're interested in the same subject matter. So you might all be interested in a certain television show, a hobby, something that you consume and other people do as well. And the last one is a community of practice. This is where you have shared interests, passions, or concern. This one's a little bit more action oriented. So you can see there's some overlap with a community of interest. You're interested in these things, but what are you doing to solve a problem or to learn together? This is where there's an action that's driving that community. So as you explore the type of communities that are useful to you, there's a couple of things that you can ask yourself. What do you enjoy doing that you'd like to share with others? What do you feel like is missing in your life right now? Maybe you're learning to code and you'd really like to have a study group help with accountability, co-learning experiences, get some support. This is another great place to start. You also might think of like, what do you have that you can offer to others? So maybe you're a career changer too. Maybe your background was in marketing, but you're coming into tech. So maybe you want to talk with other marketers about the unique approach that you bring to tech, about those transferable skills from your last career to this career. Finding a community that's willing to talk about those things or that's already talking about those things can be a great way to discover what works for you. So now we're going to talk a little bit about whether or not you, or not whether or not, but why developers stay or leave communities. So I think it's really important to say that we're all dynamic and complex human beings. We make friends, sometimes friendships fade away. And I think it's worth noting because you don't have to feel obligated to stay in a community. Sometimes you make your way into a community and then you transition out of that community because it's no longer filling your needs. That's okay. I am going to take you to my background a little bit, where I came from. I spent time teaching English, and so I studied and I taught the hero's journey quite a bit, but I think that it applies to the things that we are talking about here today. So in the hero's journey, the first step is the ordinary world. Okay, so that's like, where are you at today? Or if you're making a career transition, before you've made that transition, who are you? And you think about the person you are, the things that you've learned. Now, the next part of the hero's journey is that call to adventure. And in this sense, I'm going to say that my call to adventure was, I'm going to come into tech. Should I come into tech? For me, it was an exploration. I wasn't feeling like I should have a career transition. I started learning to code because it helped me through my trauma. And so there came a point where I had to make a decision as to whether or not I wanted to move into this new world of technology. And from that, there's obviously going to be changes. You know, I wasn't going to be an English teacher anymore. I was going to have to learn new skills. And so at this point, you have to make that decision whether or not you want to move into this new world or if you want to stay in your ordinary world. But once you make that decision, the next stage in the hero's journey is meeting the mentor. And so the mentor, in this sense, can have a lot of different definitions. It can be someone that you meet with one-on-one. It can be someone whose talks you attend, whose blog posts you read. It can be a community of people. I think what's most important to recognize here is that a mentor is something that gives you the skills, somebody that equips you with the skills or the tools that you need to succeed. So sometimes that might be, hey, check out this curriculum. This can help you get to the next stage in your learning journey. Or, hey, you're leveling up and you want to learn how to use this particular technology. Here are some blog posts or resources that can help you get to that place. So somebody that's helping you with the tools or skills you need. I know for me, when I was coming into tech, the most important thing was I just needed some encouragement because I kept thinking, I can't do this. Why am I doing this? I'm not good enough to do this. And having someone there to say, I felt that same way when I was at the same stage you are. Those are normal feelings. That was the type of mentorship I needed. So next in the stage, you will cross the threshold. So you make that decision. I chose to stop teaching and then I went to boot camp. And now you're feeling uncomfortable, but you're taking what you've had, the tools and things that you've learned from your mentor, and you're starting to apply those things to help you get to that next stage. And after that, we have test, allies, and enemies. And that will be the next stage in the hero's journey. And so this is kind of really building those skills. You're going to be tested, whether that's in an interview, whether that's learning how to debug or coding a portfolio project, you are going to be tested. You will need those skills. You'll deepen those skills, use the tools that you've learned, and then you'll find some allies. Who are the people that are going to support you as you move forward? And then we have enemies. So enemies can mean different things. This might be an interviewer that feels like an enemy. This might be a gatekeeper. It really might be yourself if you have that self-doubt. But when you have those allies and remember what you've learned from your mentors, then you'll be more likely to succeed going forward. The next stage is when you approach the inmost cave. This is when you're navigating through your greatest fears, your conflicts. This is where you might have some setbacks, or you might have to try a new approach or new idea. So if you're coming into tech, we see this all the time. I think that the innermost cave is probably the interviewing portion of getting that first job, right? There are a lot of people coming into tech right now. There are a lot of rejections happening. So you have to work through those conflicts. You have to work through the setbacks, and you have to figure out what is your approach when you go into this. So you're going to take the lessons that you've learned and you're going to regroup and figure out how to utilize those as you move on to the supreme ordeal. And that is the climax of the story. This is the most intense part, the most exciting point of the story. This might be a final interview. This might be getting a promotion. This can be a lot of different things in your journey, but it's this like final test, which is going to be one of your greatest challenges. This is where you kind of move from that ordinary world, and now you're moving to the next world that you're going to be living in. And since tech is an evolving journey, there's always potential to cycle through this journey over and over again. You don't go through one hero's journey in your life. You're going to go through many. And this is going to be, might be changing careers or changing positions, learning, job searching, advancing, pivoting in your career, learning more, changing how you learn. All of these things are part of that journey. There's always going to be that need to be on the journey, to find new mentors, to acquire new tools. And the most efficient way to do this is as part of a community, whether that's a community that allows you to grow and to continue those journeys over and over within them, or communities that support you in the specific journey you are in the moment. So I think that through my experience, I've identified 5 primary reasons that people stay as a part of the community. And that's if they find support, friendship and relationships, opportunities for growth and learning, collaboration, and a sense of belonging. Developers leave communities when they don't have those things, but it's not the only reason why developers leave communities. They leave when they outgrow the mission, they don't have time, the space no longer aligns with their values, they found another community that's a better fit. Now, I'm going to talk briefly about 2 reasons that I hear often that are worth talking about here, but I could go in depth with these more in a totally different talk because I think they're so important. The first reason is mental illness or mental health challenges that somebody has faced. They feel like they couldn't be part of a community. And what I want to say to that is that I came into tech after I went through a major life trauma. I accidentally started virtual coffee when the whole world started going through trauma together at the start of the pandemic. My own history of mental illness directly led to where I am now. For a long time, I was really isolated. I thought that no one could understand me. I was on this lonely journey, and I felt that way until my educational coach at my boot camp shared her story with me, the story of her trauma, which was very different from my own. But she said words that I said to myself in my head, and I had never heard anyone say those words before. And she taught me that we're not meant to be in isolation. We're meant to be in community, to grow together. And in fact, humans are hardwired to be parts of community for survival, for growing together. When people tell stories that we connect with, our brains light up. And we produce connection hormones that allow us to feel closer to someone when that happens. Our brains and our bodies are meant to be part of community. I know that it can be really hard if you're struggling through mental health challenges, and it might feel like you shouldn't be around others. But this is a note just to say that you should. Another reason that I hear people not wanting to join communities is because they feel like they have nothing to give back. Now, when I started Virtual Coffee, I had been a developer for 8 months. I didn't think that I had much to share either, but it wasn't about that. It was about contributing, and we can all contribute in different ways. For example, if you're learning how to code, you can offer a person the step behind you some advice or guidance on where to start. You can cheer someone on when they're working through a bug, let someone know you enjoyed their blog post, pair up and talk through code together. Everyone has something to contribute. Now, there are also different roles that you can play as part of a community. Every community is going to have a different structure, so this will vary, but we're going to talk about some high-level roles and best practices for each of those roles. As a member, you can likely take on the role of observer explorer, a contributor, or a builder. So what does that mean? An observer explorer is someone who quietly watches and listens to what's happening. For example, we have a member who's part of Virtual Coffee who I think has only come to one coffee chat. We have coffee chats twice a week and lunch and learns on many Fridays throughout the year. And they recently gave some feedback when we asked for community feedback, saying that because of the time zone, they're not able to attend, but they love being able to read the Slack messages to see how other people are communicating with each other. And most people in Virtual Coffee probably don't know this person. They wouldn't know their name, but this person is involved personally in our community through listening and reading. So that would be kind of an observer explorer. A contributor is someone who participates and takes some action within the community. So they might attend events, share in a small group setting, and even respond with emojis on posts in Slack. You might ask and answer questions. You might be involved in the rituals of the community. So a couple of our rituals on Wednesdays, we do midweek check-ins. So I post a message asking how everyone is doing. They might respond to that. On Fridays, we do a gratitude post asking what people are grateful for that week. And they might post there too. So those are the types of rituals that I'm talking about. As we move into the leader category, we take many of the practices with us that we just talked about, and we see that these leaders help to strengthen and build the community. They aren't always the most vocal of the group, but they invest in supporting the community. These leaders build up the community and they contribute to the progress and the stability of the group. They might build structures, support, help create a safe space, might run a sub-community, help update processes, volunteer to improve the community, or act as an advisor. It's worth noting that it doesn't have to be in an official capacity. And a lot of communities that have started authentically and naturally, it might take them a while to get those roles and understand what their community needs. So having people who kind of fill those roles can be incredibly helpful. Everyone in a community can be an advocate for the community. That means they're concerned with the overall health of the community and invested in sharing what they've learned from the community. So how can you help your peers and developer communities grow? Hopefully now we have a good sense of what makes a strong community. And I want to talk about how you can support the community in other ways. And this means being grateful, respectful, being an active participant in your own growth, all of these things will help you to support the community. So for example, if you're asking a question in an asynchronous environment like Slack or Discord, do your research before asking that question. Don't expect members of the community to do the work for you. To help support developers asking questions, we actually created this guide at Virtual Coffee for asking questions. So I'm going to go ahead and post that in the chat right now. You can check that out. If someone does provide you with help, it's nice to be thankful and grateful. Just say thank you. Saying thank you goes a long way to showing that you appreciate someone's time. And we always want to be respectful of other people's time. No one owes you their time. Not showing up late, demanding a response for someone, sending them a message every time you have a problem, being rude or angry when someone doesn't have the time, capacity, or availability to meet with you detracts from your credibility and disturbs the fabric of a supportive community. Be kind, be kind, be kind. I want to stress again that it's really important to recognize that anyone can help support each other. And when we do this, we create psychologically safe spaces. When we have those safe spaces, people are more likely to take an active participant role, to work through conflict together, and to innovate. In a psychologically safe space, there's a norm for how failure is treated. There's a focus on growth and teamwork, not shame and failure. This is what allows us to learn from each other and to create a sense of horizontal mentorship. By keeping our minds open to everyone in that space, this is where we learn and grow together. We want to assume best intent of the people that we're working with and talking to, but we also want to recognize that the impact of our words matters. I think it's worth noting to say, wait, let me see, am I on the right side here? Oh, this is where we're going, so I'll just leave it there. If you want to help, you can always ask community leaders what kind of help they need. It's useful if you're specific. So you might have a unique perspective on something. Say, hey, I noticed there are a lot of questions about where to get started in this community. Can I record a video intro for new community members that walks them through the highlight reel? Or I have a lot of experience documenting processes. Could I help create a document that explains how to participate in small group meetups in our community? Being specific can often help overwhelm organizers and support them. Here are some key roles that I've identified as useful in the community. So if you are interested in being a part of the growth of the community, these are ways that you can work on it. You can help with documentation. You can focus on things like community health and support. So if you have a good read on people and the communities, if you like answering questions or identifying the growing needs of a community, you can bring those concerns to community leads. You can help with event support. You might need to recruit volunteers and participants, or organize speakers or coordinate logistics. There's a lot that goes into event organization, so chances are there's going to be a need. Can you provide feedback support? I have heard some people say that don't ask for feedback unless you know how to deal with that feedback. And I think that's hard. It's a growing process. And so I think that finding ways to support that feedback process is incredibly important. Can you help with moderation? If you're willing to abide by the community's code of conduct, you might be able to create and review guidelines for moderation and help implement it. And then lastly, you can be a volunteer coordinator, which is just a catch-all. What haven't we talked about that could use some support? So if you see a need, you can support the need. Now, those are some roles that you can play within a community. We've talked about things that are useful for being a part of community. Now, I think it's important to figure out how to evaluate communities. And this is what the slide is all about. So if you're discovering communities, how can you discover the one that's right for you? So the first one is authentic connection. And what I want to say is authentic connection isn't transactional. You don't want somebody that is marketing to you. In the same way, if someone DMs you for a meeting, you don't want to be marketed too. You want to have a conversation. You want to feel like you're a part of something else. You're interested in knowing more about the people in the community and about developing relationships. You're not there just to get something from someone else. It's not transactional. This is going to look different for everyone, and those connections are going to take a different amount of time as well. This is why we've emphasized that it's okay to participate in ways that make people feel comfortable. Another way to evaluate community is by support responsiveness. Silence is not a good sign. When a member asks a question, how quickly does someone respond? How many responses are there? Are further connections created? Let's jump into the co-working room or Zoom. Can we set up a time to meet? Can I share this document with you for your feedback? Can we work on this together? Find a space where people take care of each other. Now, that is to say, when we talk about support responsiveness, you have to kind of evaluate it on a case-by-case basis. I talked earlier about asking productive questions. So if there's a question that's really general and shows that the community member has not done any work themselves, then I could see there not being a response to that, just because that's putting the community in a position where they're doing all of the work, which is not something that you should be doing. Think about how the community talks about themselves. So they say, we do this thing every Tuesday, or we do this thing on Thursdays. Are they talking about themselves as part of the group? It means that they're working together as a team, that they feel a sense of belonging, that this is something that they participate in together. This is ideal for a healthy community. And lastly, horizontal mentorship. This means there's a growth mindset in your community. By keeping our minds open to learning from anyone in the organization, no matter the status or role, we allow ourselves to be versatile and open to growth. A growth mindset is where we believe in hard work and openness to input from others, and learning can develop talents, as opposed to a fixed mindset where we might be born with those talents. Members can learn something from every person in the community. If I haven't said that 5 times already, I will say it again. It doesn't matter what your experience is. Egos getting in the way of collaboration is way less likely to happen when you are hearing from and listening to members at all stages of the journey and different backgrounds. Diversity of career level provides opportunities for new perspective and innovation. So if you haven't figured out the answer to my talk, it's, of course, yes, you do need a community, because we are made for community, but it's about finding the one that fits your needs. Don't be afraid to leave communities that aren't filling your needs, or find communities that are good for you and the stage that you are in your career. So I want to say thank you for having me today. And if you have any questions, you can feel free to ask them now.
Okay, awesome. Thank you so much for sharing, Becca. Yeah, I think you made a really convincing case about developer communities, and yeah, I think it's hope everyone has benefited from that. So now we have a time for Q&A. So yeah, feel free to start typing in the Q&A box, and we'll get to your questions. Yeah, right now I don't see any open questions on my end, but keep them coming, please. Still got about a little over 10 minutes. So anything for Becca, please ask. Oh, seconds. Okay.
How do you find a community? All right.
Yeah, how do you find a community? Okay, let's start with that one.
I think that I don't like the word networking, because it often has this gross kind of feeling where you're trying to get something out of someone. But I've found all of my communities either through Twitter or by attending in-person conferences where I've met other people. So starting with a broader sense of community, what you might do is find a place that you're comfortable talking with other people. So maybe you have a group on Twitter, or you have some interaction on Twitter, and you say, hey, where can I find a good community that supports my need? Or you can go on Discord and try and find people who are live streaming about the topics that you're interested in. And many people who are live streaming also have Discord. So finding someone that's a good community for you, or talking about the things that you enjoy talking about, can be another way to find a community. I also know that people use meetup.com to search for communities. And if you're new to learning how to code, I think the Code Newbie Twitter chat on Wednesdays at, I think it's 9 p.m. Eastern, that was a huge community for me. And that's actually the community that led to me finding more intimate communities that have helped me through my journey.
Okay, thank you. Christina asks, where can you find different communities to join? Yeah, I think you kind of mentioned a little bit, but yeah, do you have anything else to add?
Another way maybe, so if you're looking at a blogging platform too, if there's a particular blogger or speaker that you follow, number one, I would always say, send them a message to thank them for what they're doing and say that you appreciate their content. And then maybe ask them, say like, I love what you're doing. Are you part of any communities that you would recommend? Or are there communities that you recommend? Because it might seem like they have values that align with your own, and that can help you to identify what a good community for you would be.
Okay, awesome. Here another question: Is it wrong to look for community for the for the purpose of job searching?
I don't think that it's wrong to look for a community for the purpose of job searching, but I also think you need to go back to that idea of what it makes a good supportive community member. So you don't want it to be transactional. Don't just go in there and ask people for what jobs they're offering or how you can find a job. Think about how you can give back to that community as well. So if you're going to take something in a community, always make sure that you're giving back as well. So, maybe you might offer to pair up with somebody or look over their resume and cover letter and give them feedback. But I will also say that I have recommended, I don't know how many people at this point in the last 2 years for jobs that they have. Some of them have gotten those jobs, some of them haven't. But I look at my community members, the people who are part of Virtual Coffee, and I know who the most active community members are. I see how they're responding to other people, how they're answering questions. And it gives me a good sense of who I can recommend when people come to me and ask for those recommendations. Actually, like just before this meeting, I got off of another call and somebody asked me, hey, who would you recommend for this position? And I had one person in mind immediately. And I said, I'm going to make up a list and get back to them with some more folks too. But think about that too. As you're interacting, that becomes kind of a living resume and cover letter for getting those questions in.
Okay. Awesome. Next question is from Amit. I'm looking to start a community, but don't have a clear purpose. How do I zero down?
All right, this is a good question. So good that I've written a blog post kind of about this. So let me find this blog post. And this is like one of my favorite things. It becomes hard. Sometimes you have a lot of people asking for your time. Like, can we meet one-on-one? Well, what do you want to talk about? Can be a really important question. And so I found that like optimizing my time through writing has been really helpful for me to be able to reach more people, because I just don't have, as a parent of 4 very active kids, I don't really have much free time. So let's see here. It's on Dev2. I think, nope, I passed it up somewhere. Oh, here. So you want to get started in community. Where can I'll post this in the chat.
Yeah, put it in chat, and maybe later I can go back and put it on the event page as well if people are interested.
So hopefully that's helpful.
All right. We got some questions in the chat too, sent directly to us. So here's one question. What advice do you have for getting through the plateaus in your career? How can you ask a community for support in this? That's interesting.
Cry if you need to. That's always valid. I have found that there are a couple of people that I've met through Virtual Coffee who have been hugely important. I've been able to reach out to them in times that I'm struggling and say like, I have no idea what I am doing right now. What should I be doing? And a lot of times it's just an affirmation of you can keep going. But also I would like to say that it's okay to take breaks. If you need a break, take a break. Um, and know that you have that community that's going to help support you get back on track. And even sharing that, we have a heavy channel in Virtual Coffee Slack where we can talk about like some things that are harder to talk about or overwhelming or sad. And sometimes we'll see that there's a lot of burnout that happens in tech. It moves in a really fast pace and you feel like you're hitting plateaus a lot of times. Sometimes that means you need to take a step back, regroup, and move forward. Other times, I find that it's hugely important to start working with other people because there's built-in motivation when you work with other people. And so if you've hit a plateau and you're up for a little bit of self-organizing, actually, we have on our repository, we have a how to start your own cohort tips and tricks. Let me grab that discussion thread because I think that can be really helpful as well. Ask some people to do learning with you. Hey, do you want to build a project together? Or I would really like to learn how to collaborate. How do we do this together? So I'm going to find where that is. Oh, here we go. I'm going to put this in the chat too, and hopefully that will give you some tips on where to get started there.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, I'll make sure to grab some of those links and put it in the event page so it's somewhere that everyone else can see. Okay, so another question: how do you get over the worry of asking for help within the community and looking unintelligent?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think that the first answer is be okay with feeling unintelligent. One of my favorite companies, Infinite Red, they do React Native, mobile development. Their CEO often plays the role of the person in the room that will ask those questions. Like Todd is great about saying like, I'm going to ask the question that people are afraid to ask because they don't want to feel like they're not smart. And I read this book. I can't remember what it's called right now, but I think it's called Ultra Learning. And one of the things the author said was, the person that will grow the fastest is the person who is not afraid to ask those questions. And so it becomes this navigation of figure out when to ask questions. Do your research first. If you are still lost or you've explored some options and you're not sure where to go, ask that question. Hey, I've tried these things and I haven't been able to identify what I need to do next. Are you willing to look at this? Can you pair up? Those are all good ways to show that you've done the research, you put in the effort yourself, and now you're asking the questions. But you're way more likely to grow as soon as you start asking those questions. So I say just go for it. It's hard and it feels uncomfortable, but that's what growing pains are.
Yeah, that's great. Christina asked, is virtual coffee open to those that are brand new to coding?
Yeah, so Virtual Coffee right now, we are on a pause for new members. We are moving into our third year of Virtual Coffee in a community that was accidentally started, but we're doing that so we can create support structures for our existing community and make sure that we can bring in new community members in the very near future. So our thing is we want to support developers at all stages of the journey. So 100% we are here for those people. Right now, the best way to gain support from Virtual Coffee is to check out our YouTube channel, listen to our podcasts, follow us on Twitter, where we're dropping as much information as we can to support the external community while we get ready to kind of relaunch open membership in the near future.
Yeah, great. Yeah, because of time, I think I'll just grab one or two more. Yeah. So Kira asked, could you please share some resources or advice of building and facilitating developer communities? For example, there's a huge group of developers working in one company, but they don't really behave as a community. How do we make a real professional community out of this group of people?
I need to write a blog post on this because I also get this question a lot. So I right now am doing this for DeepGram, kind of what we're calling the community discovery phase. So rather than jump right into community building, what you can do is see where your community members are. What are they interested in? What are the needs of the community? Where is there a lack of support? Where is there a need that should be filled, that you can fill? And then moving from there into Rosie Sherry has some really great articles on minimum viable communities.
Mm,
That's a great set of tips for how to do that exploration. So I think it's about finding that thing that your community can organize around and you can get the buy-in for, and then you can start to move your community forward from there.
okay, great. Yeah, the last question that we'll do for today, Nira asked, I have 8 years of experience in the software field, but since 2008, I'm a housewife, and now I want to revive my career. Are there any communities for moms as developers?
This is my
Great.
favorite question. So thanks for
Yes,
sharing
awesome.
that. As a mom of four, I know it can be really overwhelming. And just remember that you already have those transferable skills. There are mom communities out there. I used to be part of a mom community that's no longer out there. And it's one of the things that's near and dear to my heart as we move into this third year of virtual coffee, where I hope to revamp our Moms in Tech small group meetup that we do within the community. I would say that the mom communities that are out there, there's not one that I would recommend. Many of them I know have been caught with some in negative circumstances. So I wouldn't recommend those. I don't know all of them out there, but I would say that, finding a group of people out there that might be willing to meet up could be useful. So if you're on Twitter or LinkedIn or whatever social, say, hey, are there any moms out there who are trying to make their way back to the workforce, or moms who are in tech now that would be willing to meet up? I would. So I think that, putting that out there could be a good place to start, but keep your eye on virtual coffee if you're interested, because that's one of the things that I hope to get started up by this summer.
Okay, cool. Yeah, so because of time, that's a wrap up here. But thank you so much, Bekah, for answering all of these questions. So let me put some helpful links in the chat while we add it. Yeah, so Bekah, I think you said that the best way to reach out to you is Twitter, right? So
yes, I'm prolific tweeter.
Yeah, I can tell. So I post Bekah's Twitter in the link, so feel free to follow her after this and reach out if you have other questions. So that is officially the end. I just want to make some small announcements while we're at it. So as many of you might know, next week we'll have kind of the biggest thing that we've done so far at Codementor events, which is the Developer Growth Summit 2022. So the link is also in the chat. I hope that you can sign up and join us for at least some of the sessions. Yeah, Bekah, thank you so much for taking the time to share with us. And I just want to ask if you have any final remarks or any encouragement that you want to leave our audience before we end.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. I think that it's often hard, this tech journey. And I had a friend who told me about a year ago, she said, Bekah, it's called growing pains because they hurt, right? So it's not always going to be comfortable, and you're going to have to work through those pains, but it's worth it. And if you have a community supporting you, it's going to make it even easier.